At the family party where parents announced, giving all $1.3 million to your brother. Then they looked at me, "You're a failure, handle your own life." But then my grandmother stood up and said, "Now it's my turn." I've always hated family parties, but Brandon's 35th birthday was special. His parents insisted they had important news. Sitting in the car in front of their house in the suburbs, I looked out the familiar windows and tried to force myself to get out. I'm 32. I've been working for an insurance company for 8 years. I live alone in a small apartment, and I'm still afraid of disappointing my parents. Every time my mom calls and asks when I'm getting married, I feel like a 15-year-old loser. And Brandon has always been the star of the family. He dropped out of college in his second year, but his parents forgave him because he was looking for himself. Now he's 35, and he's still searching, either in real estate or launching a startup or trading cryptocurrency. My mom always said that I was born older than my age. As a child, I picked up Brandon's toys, did his homework for him when he forgot, lied to teachers about being sick when he skipped school. They called it responsibility. I called it fatigue. When I entered the house, I smelled the familiar smell of my mother's perfume and my father's tobacco, even though he had quit smoking 5 years ago. The living room was decorated with blue balloons, Brandon's favorite color. On the table was a huge cake with the words, "Happy birthday, champion, champion." No one knew what exactly he was a champion at, but his parents always called him that. On my 19th birthday, the cake was a supermarket cake with the words, "Congratulations" on it, and that was because the custom-made cakes were out of red roses, which I loved. My mom said that pink ones were good too, and I agreed, as I always do. "Deli?" Mom hugged me, but it was mechanical. "You're late. Brandon is already here." Of course I was late. I was always late, always not good enough, always doing something wrong. Brandon was sitting on the couch, beer in hand, telling his dad about his new project. His hair was perfectly styled, his shirt expensive, his watch shiny. He always knew how to look successful, even when everything was going to hell. I remember how a year ago he came to borrow $5,000 for an investment that would bring millions. My parents gave it to him without hesitation. When I asked for help with the repair of the bathroom after a leak, my mother said that I had to learn to live within my means. "Hey, sis," he winked at me. "How's it going at your boring job?" "Boring job. I help people deal with insurance when they get into trouble. It's an important job, but it's always been boring to Brandon." "I'm working," I said shortly. "And how are things going with that new project of yours?" "Oh, the market is tough right now," he waved his hand. "But I have a few ideas that will take off soon. A couple of ideas that are going to take off. I've heard that 1,000 times before. Just like, the market is not easy, and we have to wait for the right moment. And then parents would open their wallets again." Grandma Ruth was sitting in her favorite chair by the window. She was 78 years old, but her mind was clear and her eyes were sharp. She was the only one who always defended me when my parents compared me to Brandon in my favor. I went over and kissed her on the cheek. "How are you, Grandma?" "I'm fine, dear. Come sit next to me. Things are about to get interesting." There was something strange in her voice, but before I could ask what it was, my father picked up his wine glass and tapped it with his fork. He did this at every family celebration, trying to attract attention, as if we weren't all already sitting in the same room staring at him. Everyone. He smiled so broadly that I hadn't seen him so happy in ages. "We have great news for everyone, especially Brandon." "Especially for Brandon, of course we do. When was the last time they had news especially for me? Maybe when I graduated from college with honors?" "No, that was when they were upset that I didn't go to graduate school as originally planned." My mom smiled too, standing next to my dad. They looked like a couple from a happy retirement commercial ironed, happy, full of plans for the future. "As you know, we finally sold the store," Dad continued. 30 years of work, and now we can enjoy our retirement. But the most important thing is that we have $1,300,000 that we want to pass on to our children." I felt my heart start to beat faster. $1,300,000. I could pay off the mortgage, buy a decent car, maybe even start my own business, which I had been dreaming of for years. Helping people not only with insurance, but with financial planning in general. Brandon leaned forward, his eyes sparkling. And we decided. Dad looked at Brandon with a pride I'd never seen in his eyes when he looked at me, that all the money would go to Brandon. He knows what to do with the money, he has a vision, ambitions. He will be able to multiply this amount and secure the future of the whole family. Time seems to have stopped. All the money goes to Brandon, all of it. Not half, not most of it, all of it. I looked at my parents, trying to figure out if I had heard correctly. Maybe I missed something? What about me? My voice was quieter than I wanted it to be, but I asked anyway. My mother looked at me with that expression I'd known since childhood, a little sad, a little disappointed, as if I'd done something wrong again. Delia, dear, she began in the tone of voice that you use when you tell children about the death of a goldfish. You've always been, well, let's just say you've been a failure. You've never risked anything, never had big plans. You've been working at the same job for 8 years and you don't even try to change anything. The words hit me like a slap in the face. I never took risks. What about when I took out a student loan, even though my parents said they couldn't help? What about when I moved to another city for a job, not knowing anyone there? You're 32 and you're still alone, without children, without a home of your own, my mom continued. We understand that it's unfortunate, but the reality is what it is. You have to figure out your own life, my dad added. And Brandon is different. He has potential that needs to be unlocked. Support? When did they support me? When I was in college and working as a waitress in the evenings and a cashier on weekends to pay for school? When I was sick with the flu and home alone with a fever while they were busy helping Brandon with his next project? I remembered how 2 years ago I asked to borrow $3,000 to repair my car after an accident. My mom said they didn't have any extra money. A month later, Brandon received $10,000 for a revolutionary idea with food delivery, which failed in 2 months. Brandon was silent, looking at the floor. He didn't even try to object or say that the money should be divided equally. He just sat there and waited for the check for $1,300,000 to be handed to him. My own brother, with whom I shared my childhood, toys, secrets. The living room was silent. I could only hear the ticking of the clock on the wall and my own heartbeat. Everyone was looking at me, waiting for a reaction, crying, hysteria, resigned head nodding as usual. I looked at the cake with the inscription, "Happy Birthday, Champion," and suddenly realized that I would never get a cake like that in my life. I will never be a champion in the eyes of my parents. Even if I became president of the country, they would say that Brandon would have done a better job. And then Grandma Ruth stood up, slowly, leaning on her cane, but with the dignity I had been missing. "Now it's my turn to speak," she said, her voice steely. Grandma Ruth stood in the middle of the living room, leaning on her wooden cane, and looked at each of us in turn. I saw something in her eyes that resembled the calm before a storm. Mom and Dad looked a little uncomfortable. They hadn't expected anyone to want to add anything to their solemn speech. "Ruth," Dad began in a soft voice, "maybe it's best not to now." "That's exactly why now is the best time," Grandma replied, not taking her eyes off him. "What I have to say concerns everyone here." I had never seen my grandmother so determined. Usually she was quiet, watching from the sidelines, sometimes giving me wise advice when I came to her with my problems. But now there was a certain power coming from her that made even Brandon put down his beer and straighten up in his chair. "So, all the money to Brandon," Grandma repeated, nodding her head, "and let Delia deal with it herself. Interesting, very interesting." "Mom," my mother interjected, "we made an informed decision. Brandon has more investment opportunities." "Investment opportunities," Grandma smiled, but it was not warm. "Tell me, my dear, what do you know about your son's investments over the past 2 years?" Brandon tensed. I saw him clutch the beer bottle and his knuckles turned white. "Grandma, don't," he began. "Shut up," Ruth interrupted him sharply. "Adults are talking." "So," she looked at her parents again, "do you know that your son has lost $28,000 in casinos in the last 6 months?" The silence in the room became deafening. Mom opened her mouth, but didn't make a sound. Dad looked at Brandon with an expression as if he had seen a ghost. "Or that he doesn't drink only on holidays," Grandma continued, That he keeps a bottle of whiskey in his car at all times, and he thinks no one notices the smell of the mints he uses to drown it out? That's not true, his mother exclaimed, but her voice was trembling. Not true? His grandmother looked at Brandon. Look her in the eye and tell her. Brandon was silent. He sat with his head down and twirled the bottle in his hands. I looked at him and suddenly realized that all these years, when he looked so confident and successful, it was just a mask. And also, Grandma's voice became quieter, but even more menacing. Do you know how much he owes Tommy Correntes from East Street? Dad turned pale. Tommy Correntes was known in our neighborhood as a man you didn't want to mess with. He lent money at high interest rates to those who were denied loans by the banks. How much? Dad barely managed to get out. $53,000, Grandma answered calmly, with interest. And he has another week to pay back at least half of it. Mom started to cry. Not loudly, but the tears were streaming down her cheeks, and she didn't try to wipe them away. Dad stared at Brandon as if he were seeing him for the first time. Why didn't you say anything? He whispered. What difference would it have made? Brandon finally spoke, his voice angry. You would have found a way to judge me anyway. Condemn you? I couldn't take it. Condemn you? Are you kidding? They all looked at me. I rarely raised my voice, even less often argued with anyone in the family. All my life, I continued, feeling something hot and unfamiliar build up in my chest. All my life, I've listened to you tell everyone what a wonderful son you have, how special he is, how he has a gift, how he will definitely become a millionaire. Delia, calm down, my mother tried to intervene. No, I won't calm down. I stood up from my chair. What am I? Am I a ghost? I've been working in the same place for 8 years. It's bad. He can't keep a job for more than a year because he is looking for himself. I live modestly and do not ask you for money. I am boring. He constantly borrows and does not pay back. He has temporary difficulties. My grandmother looked at me with pride. For the first time in my life, someone looked at me as if I was doing something right. And you know what's funny? I felt my voice getting louder, but I couldn't stop myself. You say you can't support me. Who supported me in college? Who? We gave you money, my mother began. That's a lie, Grandma Ruth interjected. She looked at me with pain in her eyes. Deli, dear, I need to tell you something. When you started college, your parents had an educational fund for you, $15,000 that they had been saving since you were born. I felt the floor float under my feet. But a year before you started, Brandon asked for money for a startup. He promised to pay back double the amount in 6 months. Your parents gave him the money. Mom, don't, my mother whispered. I have to, my grandmother shouted. She has a right to know. Delia, all the time you were in college, working 2 jobs to pay for your studies, your money was in your brother's pocket, and when he lost it on some stocks, your parents just kept quiet. The room spun around me. $15,000. I remembered those years in college, how I fell asleep over my textbooks after a 12-hour shift, how I ate 1 meal a day to save on tuition, how I gave up all the fun because I didn't have the money. Dad could not look me in the eye. We thought he'd give it back, she whispered. We really thought. And when you realized he wouldn't, why didn't you tell me? Because they thought you could handle it, Grandma answered for them. That you were strong and responsible, and Brandon needed help. Brandon had always needed help. I looked at my family, at my parents, who couldn't look me in the eye, at my brother, who still hadn't said a word of apology, and suddenly I realized that this was not my family. These are people who used me as an airbag, as a person who will always cope, always understand, always forgive. I also have news, said my grandmother, and something solemn appeared in her voice. $75,000, and I've always planned to leave it to Delia. Mom, my mother began. No, my grandmother interrupted her. This is a final decision. Delia deserves this money. She is the only one of you who lives honestly and doesn't ask others for what she can earn. I looked at my grandmother and felt tears coming to my eyes, not from self-pity but from gratitude. "Thank you, Grandma," I said quietly. "But you know what? I don't need your money." I looked at everyone present. "I don't need your inheritance. I don't need your support. I've been trying to earn your love for 32 years, and only now I've realized that I will never get it." I took my bag and went to the door. "Deli, wait," my mother called out. "No," I didn't turn around. "You said yourself, let me deal with my life on my own. So, I'm doing it." I opened the door and went out into the night, leaving my old life behind. I sat in the car in front of my parents' house for half an hour, shaking with anger and shock. My hands were shaking so badly that I couldn't start the engine. $15,000. My money. Money that was supposed to help me get an education, but instead I spent 4 years working myself to death and living on bread and peanut butter. The phone beeped with messages. First, my mom. "Deli, come back, please. Let's talk calmly." Then my dad. "You've got it all wrong. Come back tomorrow, we'll talk about it." And finally, Brandon. "Sis, I'm sorry about today. Maybe we can meet this weekend?" I deleted all the messages without replying. When I finally got home, Marcus was waiting for me in my apartment. We had been dating for a year and a half, and for the last 6 months, he had practically lived with me. Not because we were planning to move towards marriage, but because he was having temporary financial difficulties and couldn't afford to rent his own apartment. "Finally," he said, not taking his eyes off the TV. "I thought you were lost. What's going on with your family? Is there some drama again?" I looked at him, sprawled out on my couch, in my apartment, which I paid for, eating my food and watching my TV. When we met, he was working as a manager in a sports store and seemed ambitious. But a year and a half later, his ambitions had disappeared, and I was responsible for everything in our relationship. "Marcus, I need to talk to you." I sat down in the chair across from him. "Just a minute. The episode is about to end." He waved his hand, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Just a minute. Always a minute. When I needed to talk about our relationship, just a minute. When I asked for help with cleaning, a minute. When I wanted to discuss our plans for the future, a minute. Now," I took the remote control and turned off the TV. "Deli, what the hell?" He finally looked at me. I was watching this. My parents gave their entire inheritance to Brandon. $1,300,000. Nothing for me. Marcus was silent for a few seconds, processing the information. "So what?" He shrugged. "You have a job, an apartment. Why do you need their money? Why do I need their money?" I looked at the man with whom I planned to build a future and didn't recognize him. "Marcus, it's not about money. It's about how they treat me. They told me to my face that I'm a failure." "Maybe they're right." He reached for the remote. "You're taking everything too seriously. Don't make a big deal out of it. Don't make a big deal out of it." The same words that my parents used to dismiss my problems all my life. When I was bullied at school, don't make a big deal out of it. When my boss harassed me, don't make a big deal out of it. "Do you know that I've been saving for the first payment on my house for 5 years?" I asked quietly. "So what? Do you know that in the year and a half we've been together, you've never asked me if you could help me with anything? You're living in my apartment, eating my food, using my internet, and you don't even offer to share the expenses." "I told you I was going through a rough patch." He started to get irritated. "When I get a normal job, everything will be fine." "Marcus, you quit your job at the store 8 months ago, and since then you've applied to 5 companies. 5. In 8 months. I'm waiting for the right offer." He stood up from the couch. "I don't want to work just anywhere. The right offer, like Brandon's with his investment." I suddenly realized that I attracted people who were looking for someone who would be responsible for them. And who pays for everything in the meantime? I also stood up. Who cleans, cooks, does the laundry, goes to the store? Who solves all the problems while you wait for the right offer? "Deli, what's wrong with you?" He looked at me with genuine surprise. "You never complained. Just like I never complained to my parents when they gave me all the responsibilities and let Brandon do whatever he wanted. Just like I kept quiet when my colleagues at work dumped extra tasks on me because they knew Delia would not say no. Delia would handle it. Delia would not make a scene. Maybe that's the problem, I said. I never complained. I never demanded anything. I never said what I wanted. The phone rang again. It was Grandma Ruth. I answered it, trying to hide the tears in my voice. Deli, dear, how are you? Not good, Grandma. Can I come to you? Or you can come to me. We need to talk. I looked at Marcus, who had already turned the TV back on and was pretending that our conversation hadn't happened. I'll come to you, I said. Where are you going? Marcus asked as I started to pack. To Grandma's. And dinner? I thought you were going to cook something. I stopped at the door and looked at him. A 34-year-old man living in my apartment on my money and expecting me to feed him. There are eggs in the fridge, I said. You can make yourself an omelet. But you know I don't know how to cook, he grimaced. You'll learn. It took 40 minutes to get to my grandmother's house. 40 minutes to rethink my whole life. Every time I gave in, every time I was silent, every time I did someone else's work so as not to cause problems. Grandma Ruth lived in a small house on the outskirts of town. The house was old but cozy, with a garden where she grew tomatoes and flowers. When I arrived, she was already waiting on the porch with a cup of tea in her hand. I put the kettle on. We sat in her tiny kitchen, and Grandma told me things I had never known about my own family. Your mom has always been weak, she said, stirring the sugar in the tea. And your dad, he's a good man. But he'd rather turn a blind eye to problems than solve them. When you were born, I hoped that would change. You were such a smart kid, so responsible. Too responsible for your age, I added bitterly. And do you know what my fault is? I thought that if I didn't interfere, everything would work out on its own. That your parents would realize how unfairly they were treating you. But they didn't. I remember when I was 12, my mom told me I had to look after Brandon while they went away for the weekend to visit friends. He was 9, but she said, "You're older, you're more responsible." And when I was 15 and I wanted to go to the school dance, she said she couldn't buy me a dress because Brandon needed baseball equipment. I remember that dance. Grandma shook her head. You wanted to go so badly, and Brandon's equipment has been in the closet for a year and never been used. Why didn't you tell me? About the college money, about everything. Because I was afraid of ruining the family, Grandma sighed. She thought that if you didn't know the truth, at least you'd have a family. And now I don't even have that. Now you have a chance to build a real life. She took my hand. I have a room for guests. I'm old. I'll enjoy the company. And you need time to realize what you really want from life. I thought about my apartment, where Marcus was waiting for me with his demands to cook dinner. About my job, where my boss loaded me up with other people's projects because he knew I wouldn't refuse. About my parents, who were probably still waiting for me to call and apologize. I can't just quit, I said. What's holding you back? I thought about it. Indeed, what was holding me back? Was it fear? Was it habit? Or just an unwillingness to admit that my whole life was a mistake? The phone rang. Brandon. Don't answer it, Grandma said. Maybe he wants to apologize. Deli, listen, I need to talk to you. My brother sounded concerned. Can we meet tomorrow? What can we talk about, Brandon? Well, about today. I know you're upset about the inheritance, but think about it. I really do have plans to grow that money. Maybe when it works out, I can share it with you. Share it with me. In the meantime, I can give you a few thousand so you don't get angry, he continued. You know how important it is for a family to stay together. My grandmother looked at me and I could read in her eyes. Now you see what he's really like. Brandon, I said calmly, I'm not angry about the inheritance. No? That's good. I'm angry because you stole $15,000 from me and never even apologized for it. Deli, that was a long time ago, and because you're not calling now to apologize, but to make sure I don't ruin your life. You don't care that I'm in pain. You only care that I don't say anything, like I always do. You're exaggerating? No, Brandon. For the first time in my life, I'm not exaggerating. I see things as they are. I hung up and looked at my grandmother. Can I move in tomorrow? The move took only one day. When I realized how few things I actually had, I felt a little sad. 32 years of life could fit in the back of a small truck. Marcus watched me packing with a look on his face like I was crazy. Deli, are you serious? He sat on the couch with the coffee I had made him in the morning out of habit. For an old woman who lives in the middle of nowhere? For yourself, I answered, putting the books in a box. Selfish. I wonder what he called living in my apartment for a year and a half without paying for anything. Or the fact that I cooked, cleaned, and did his laundry while he was looking for himself. Maybe it's time for me to become a little selfish, I said. As I was picking up the last box, Marcus was still hoping that I would change my mind. Okay, go stay with your grandmother for a week, calm down, and then come back. Marcus, I stopped at the door. The keys to the apartment are on the table. The rent for the next month is paid. But we're not breaking up for good, are we? He sounded panicked for the first time. We were never really together, I answered. Grandma Ruth's house was in the town of Maple Creek, 100 kilometers from my old life. It had a population of 12,000 people, a main street with antique shops, a coffee shop where everyone knew each other by name, and a library that was the pride of the local community. After the hustle and bustle of the big city, this silence seemed like an incredible luxury. How do you like it here? My grandmother asked me at dinner on the first day. It's quiet, I answered. Very quiet. Do you want to go back? No. I was surprised at my own speed of response. The next day, my grandmother took me to explore the town. At the Maple Leaf coffee shop, the owner, Mary, found out that I was Ruth's granddaughter and immediately told me that she was the nicest woman in all of Maple Creek and that I was lucky to have a grandmother like her. At the antique store, the owner, Mr. Thompson, told me how his grandmother helped him when he had a heart attack, coming by every day until he recovered, bringing him food and medicine. Your grandmother is a rare person, he said. I looked at my grandmother with new eyes. At home, she had always been just a grandmother, quiet, modest, and not attracting attention. But here in Maple Creek, she was an important part of the community, someone others could count on. Why didn't you ever tell me about your life here? I asked on the way home. You never asked, Grandma smiled. When you came to visit, you were always preoccupied work, Marcus, your parents. I didn't want to burden you with my affairs. Again, someone thought that I needed to spare my nerves, not to say too much. Why did everyone decide for me what I could and couldn't handle? Grandma, I want to know everything about your life, about your real life, not just what you showed us when you came to visit us on holidays. And she told me. It turned out that after her grandfather's death 8 years ago, her grandmother did not stay at home and grieve. She became a volunteer at the local animal shelter, organized charity events for children from low-income families, and helped the elderly with shopping and doctor's appointments. At 78, she was more active than I was at 32. How do you do it all? I asked in amazement. When you do what you love, you find time, she replied. I thought about it. What did I love to do? In recent years, my whole life had revolved around what I had to do, the work I was assigned, the housework, taking care of Marcus, visiting my parents. I don't know, I admitted. I haven't thought about it in a long time. Then think about it now. You have time. The next week, my grandmother introduced me to Emily Harrison, the director of the local library. Emily was in her 50s, an energetic woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes behind glasses. Ruth tells me you're looking for a job, she said as we sat in her office among the shelves of books. The salary is low, but the work is interesting. I told her about my experience in an insurance company, about working with clients, about how much I enjoyed helping people understand complex documents. That sounds great, Emily nodded. There's a lot of work with people in the library, too, especially now that we are launching digital literacy programs for adults. A lot of older people want to learn how to use computers, but they're afraid they'll look stupid. Digital literacy for adults. I could help with these programs, I said. I have experience explaining complex things in simple language. Great. When can you start? At least tomorrow. Working at the library was not what I expected. I thought it would be quiet and calm, arranging books, helping people find the right literature. But the local library was the center of Maple Creek's social life. It hosted children's readings, hobby clubs, lectures by local historians, and computer literacy courses. My first digital literacy class consisted of 5 people aged 55 to 70. They came with notebooks and pens, ready to write down every word, and looked at computers as explosives that could detonate at any moment. Okay, I said, sitting down at one of the computers. Let's start with the simplest thing. This is a mouse. It doesn't bite. Several people laughed nervously. The most important rule is that you won't break anything, I continued, and if something goes wrong, we will fix it. The first person to dare to touch the mouse was Mr. Jenkins, an 80-year-old veteran who wanted to learn how to write emails to his grandchildren. His hands were shaking, but he was determined. I've taught young men to drive tanks, he said. I can handle this thing. An hour and a half later, Mr. Jenkins sent his first email. When a reply from his grandson appeared on the screen, his eyes filled with tears. He says he's proud of me, he said quietly. I looked at him and felt something unfamiliar. Satisfaction from work. Not just fulfillment of duties, but real joy from helping a person. A month later, my classes became the most popular program in the library. People signed up, brought friends, and told their neighbors. Deli, you're a real talent, she said. You have a way of explaining complex things in a way that people are not ashamed to not know. Maybe because I didn't know a lot of things myself, and I understand that feeling, I replied. That's when I met Jess. Jess Walker, 37 years old, is a divorced father of 9-year-old Sophia. He worked as an electrician and came to the library with his daughter every Saturday. Sophia loved to read, and Jess would sit next to some technical magazine and wait patiently for her to choose new books. Excuse me, he came up to me one Saturday. Can you help? Sophia wants a book about grasshoppers, but I don't understand how this search engine works. Of course. I showed him how to use the catalog. Does Sophia like to read? She loves it. She reads everything from fairy tales to encyclopedias. Sometimes I think she's smarter than me. You have a wonderful daughter. Thank you. She is the best thing I have. Jess didn't try to hurt me, didn't drop hints, didn't play games. He was just a father who loves his daughter and tries to give her the best. It was so unusual after Marcus and his constant demands for attention. The next Saturday, Sophia came running up to me with a new book. Look what I found! A book about a girl who became a veterinarian. Great. Do you want to be a veterinarian? Yes. Or maybe a librarian, like you. Or both. Jess smiled. She has big plans for her life. That's good, I said. Dreams should be big. We started talking. It turned out that Jess had gotten divorced 2 years ago, when his wife decided that life in a small town was too boring for her. She moved to Los Angeles, calls her daughter every month, and sends her gifts for the holidays. Sometimes Sophia asks why her mom doesn't come, he said. I don't know what to tell her. Are you telling the truth? What truth? That her mother chose her career as an actress over her family? That she thinks we're an obstacle to her dreams? That you love her and will never leave her. Jess gave me a long look. You're a very wise woman, Deli. I'm not. I just know what it's like to feel abandoned by those who are supposed to love you. Meanwhile, the phone calls from home did not stop. At first, my mom called almost every day. Deli, dear, when are you coming back? We miss you. I don't know, Mom. But it's ridiculous to live with your grandmother in the middle of nowhere. You had a normal job, an apartment. I still have a job. What job? At the library? Deli, it's not serious. It's not serious. Helping people learn and discover new opportunities is not serious. But losing money in a casino like Brandon is serious. For me, it is serious, I answered. You're making a mistake, my mother insisted. You could have discussed it calmly. Marcus called his parents. Of course he did. He complained that I had left him without warning, that I was being unreasonable. And my parents, who had never been interested in my relationship, suddenly became worried. Mom, have you ever asked me if I was happy with Marcus? Well, we thought you would tell us if something was wrong. I did, just not in words. It's not. The calls became less frequent, but they didn't stop. My dad tried to convince me to behave reasonably. Brandon suggested forgetting the past and moving on. Even Marcus called a few times, saying he was ready to forgive and that we could start over. Forgive. For me. I wonder what exactly for. But the strangest thing was that every week these calls bothered me less and less. The voices from the past seemed farther and quieter, and my new life in Maple Creek was becoming more and more real and important. "You've changed," Grandma said one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "For better or for worse? For better. You have become yourself." And who am I? A strong, intelligent woman who knows her worth and is not afraid to defend her interests. I thought about yesterday at the library. Emily suggested that I apply for a grant to expand digital education programs. A year ago, I would have said that I wasn't ready, that I needed someone more experienced. But yesterday I said, "Of course, I'll try. I have a few ideas." "You know, Grandma," I said, "they say that a person cannot change after 30. But I feel that I've only just started to live my life for real." A year at Maple Creek passed like one long, calm breath. I learned to wake up not to an alarm clock, but to the sound of birds singing outside the window. I learned how to cook my grandmother's recipes and take care of her garden. But most importantly, I learned to listen to my own voice, which I had been drowning out for years with other people's demands and expectations. My digital literacy courses became so popular that the library received a grant to expand the program. I developed separate courses for different age groups, from 50-year-olds who wanted to master social media to 80-year-olds who dreamed of communicating with their grandchildren through video calls. Each success of my students gave me more satisfaction than all the years of working in an insurance company. My relationship with Jess developed slowly, without pressure or drama. We spent our evenings together. He helped me with repairs at my grandmother's house. I helped Sophia with her homework. Sometimes we would just sit on the porch, look at the stars, and talk. For the first time in my life, I was with a man who didn't demand constant proof of love from me, didn't expect me to read his mind, didn't try to change me. "Aren't you afraid I'm too boring?" I asked one evening. "Boring?" Jess laughed. "Do you know that last week you convinced 80-year-old Mr. Wilson to create a Facebook account and find his college classmates? He stayed up all night texting old friends. It's not boring, Deli. It's magic." But the greatest happiness for me was how my relationship with my grandmother changed. We became real friends. She told me stories about her youth, about her grandfather, about how hard it was for her to be alone. And I shared my plans for the future, my dreams that I was afraid to voice before. "Do you want to know a secret?" she said one day when we were planting new roses together. "I have always dreamed of having a granddaughter who would be my friend, not just a polite girl who visits on holidays, but a real friend. And I've always dreamed of having someone who loves me for who I am," I replied. We smiled at each other, and I thought that this might be the happiest time of my life, but happiness rarely lasts long without trials. In February, my grandmother began to complain of fatigue. At first, I attributed it to the winter. It's hard for everyone in the cold months. But when the fatigue didn't go away in the spring, but rather intensified, I insisted on visiting a doctor. It was pancreatic cancer. "How much time?" my grandmother asked the doctor, as calmly as if they were talking about the weather forecast. "At this stage, usually from 3 to 6 months, he replied. "But you can undergo chemotherapy." "No," my grandmother interrupted. "I want to spend the rest of my time at home with my granddaughter." The following months were both the hardest and most rewarding of my life. I took care of my grandmother, and she continued to take care of me. Even as she was weakening, she insisted that I not quit my job at the library. "Your life shouldn't stop because of me," she would say. "Grandma, you are the most important part of my life." In June, Grandma Ruth died in her sleep while holding my hand. Her last words were, "Remember who you are, Deli. Never let anyone diminish your value again." The funeral was crowded. Half of Maple Creek came to send off a woman who had cared for everyone for so many years. Mr. Jenkins, my first computer student, brought a busload of people from neighboring towns, all of whom had received help from Grandma over the years. She was a real lady, the pastor told me after the ceremony. My family came too. My parents, Brandon, even Marcus showed up trying to look hot. They huddled around the car as if they were afraid of being infected by all the sincerity of the grief. Our condolences, dear. My mom gave me a cold hug. We know how much you loved Grandma. Thank you for coming, I replied politely. We always stick together in times of need, my dad added. This is family, family. I wonder where this family was when I was taking care of my sick grandmother, when she called and asked me to at least visit. My mom said that she was allergic to medical smells, and my dad said that he could not look at sick people. After the funeral, the notary read out the will. My grandmother left me the house and all her property, $75,000 in savings, just as she had promised. And one more surprise. It turned out that over the years, my grandmother had bought shares in several companies, and now they were worth almost $100,000. $175,000, the notary repeated, plus the house, which is estimated at about $120,000. I looked at the papers and couldn't believe it. Grandma hadn't just left me money, she'd left me the opportunity to build my own life without fear of tomorrow. Wow, Brandon whispered. Who knew an old cunt had that kind of money? Old cunt. That's how he referred to his grandmother, who had protected him from the consequences of his own decisions for years. I spent the next few days sorting through my grandmother's things. Some I gave to charity, some I gave to people who knew and loved her. In the bedroom, in an old box, I found a letter addressed to me. Dear Delia, my grandmother wrote, if you are reading this, it means that I am no longer here, and you are left with a lot of questions. I know that your family will not understand my decision to leave you everything. They believe that money should go to the one who deserves it by birthright or need. But I have always believed that money should go to a person who will use it wisely and happily. You are the only one in our family who lives an honest life. You are the only one who thinks about others without forgetting about yourself. You are the only one who has the power to change and grow. Use this money to build the life you dream of. Don't let anyone dictate how you live. And remember, a real family is not those with whom you share blood, but those who share love with you. With all my love, your Grandma Ruth. P.S. Jess is a good guy. Give him a chance. I cried over this letter, but they were not tears of grief. They were tears of gratitude. Even after her death, my grandmother continued to take care of me. But the peace did not last long. A week after the funeral, Brandon came to see me. He looked terrible, thin, sagging, his eyes red from lack of sleep or alcohol. Deli, I need to talk to you, he said without greeting me. Come in, I let him in. Do you want coffee? No, I'm fine. He sat down at the kitchen table and put his hands on it. I could see them shaking. Listen, I'm in trouble. What kind of trouble? The money my parents left me. I lost it. I wasn't surprised. Grandma had predicted it a year ago. All of it? I asked. Almost all of it. There are 30,000, maybe 40 left. He rubbed his face with his hands. I thought I knew how to invest. I thought I understood the market better than anyone else. And Tommy Correnti's debt? It's up to 80,000 with interest. With interest, Brandon's voice trembled. Deli, I need help. What kind of help? This house, he looked around the kitchen. It's worth over 100,000. If we sell it and split the money. Wait, I held up a hand. We? Split? Brandon, this is my house, but we're family. He jumped up from his chair. You can't just watch me drown. I can, especially after you've watched me drown all these years. It's different, he started pacing the kitchen. You've always earned your own way. Because I was forced to, because no one was going to help me. Deli, be reasonable. Tommy is serious. If I don't give him the money by the end of the month... What? What happens? Brandon didn't answer, but I could tell by the look on his face that things were really bad. Okay, I said after a pause. I can lend you 20,000, Not a gift, but a loan, against a receipt. 20,000? He looked at me with indignation. Deli, I need at least 50. 20 is all I can do. I need the rest of the money for my own plans. What plans? What are you going to do with that kind of money in this hole? Hole. He called Maple Creek a shithole, a town where people knew each other by name, where they helped their neighbors, where honesty and kindness were valued. It's none of your business, I said calmly. None of my business? Brandon blushed. I'm your brother. I'm in trouble, and you're only thinking about yourself. Yes, I am. For the first time in my life. And you know what? It feels great. He left, slamming the door. But the next day he came back with his parents. They looked grim and determined. Delia, dear, my mom began, barely entering the house. We found out about the situation with Brandon. I know, I replied. I offered to help him. 20,000 is not help, Dad interjected. It's a mockery. It turns out that $20,000 that I earned with honest work and was ready to give away for nothing is a mockery. I don't have any more money to spare, I said. That's a lie, my mother replied sharply. You have all that money Grandma left you. So what? Sell the house, Dad said. You have nothing to do here anyway. Get your life back on track, and the money will help Brandon pay off his debts and start over. What about me? Your life is an escape from reality. My mom sat down next to me and took my hand. Deli, you're hiding here from the real world, from real relationships, from your career, from your future. Real relationships? Like the one I had with Marcus? A real career, like the insurance company where I was used? A real future, like the one my parents had planned for me? I'm not hiding, I said quietly. That's not living, Brandon interjected. That's existence. A library in the middle of nowhere, a course for old people. What are you wasting your life for? What I spend my life for, to help people find new opportunities, to do a job that brings me joy, to be in a relationship with a man who respects me. Family is more important than money, my mother continued. You wouldn't leave your brother on the street, would you? And you left me, I replied. When I was in trouble, where were you? When I was taking care of my sick grandmother, who helped me. It was your decision to move here, my father said. The conversation lasted for another hour. They tried to convince me to behave reasonably, think about my family, not be selfish. And for the first time in my life, I clearly saw who they really were. Not parents worried about my fate, but people who were used to me always sacrificing myself for their peace of mind. I'm not selling the house, I said finally, and I'm not giving Brandon more than 20,000. That's the final decision. They left angry. A week later, I received a subpoena. Brandon was suing me, trying to prove that Grandma was incapacitated when she wrote her will. I was not afraid. On the contrary, I was angry. Real, pure anger that I hadn't felt in years. How dare they question the intelligence of a woman who, until her last days, was smarter than all of them put together. I hired a lawyer, a young but experienced woman named Rebecca Stone. She listened to my story, notes in hand. You have a strong case, she finally said, but prepare for the family to use everything they can against you. Like what? You're moving here, breaking up with your fiancé, changing jobs. They'll try to present it as evidence that you influenced the sick elderly woman. But that's absurd. Of course. But the court has to consider all the arguments. The next few months were hell. Brandon really pulled out all the stops. He claimed that I had isolated my grandmother from her family, that I was brainwashing her, that I was using her illness for my own purposes. But I had proof. Medical certificates confirming that my grandmother was fully capable until the last weeks of her life. Testimonies from neighbors about how she led an active social life. Records from the library, where we attended various events with her. The most painful day was when Brandon brought two men in dark suits to the house. I was at home, planting new flowers in my grandmother's garden. Delia, Brandon approached me. I want you to meet them. This is Vinny and Rick. They are Tommy Correnti's business partners. The men were silent, but their eyes spoke for themselves. We heard you don't want to help your family, the older one said. That's stupid, girl. My help is my decision, I replied, trying to hide the tremor in my voice. Sometimes people make bad decisions, the other added. It was a threat, an open threat on my own land. You have to leave, I said firmly. Now. Deli, don't be stupid, Brandon began, but I interrupted him. You brought these people to my house? To my grandmother's house? How dare you? I just wanted you to understand the seriousness of the situation. I understand. I realize that you are ready to use any method to get what you want, even threaten your own sister. The men left, but before they did, the older one said, Think carefully, girl. Family is sacred. That night I did not sleep. I sat by the window with my grandfather's baseball bat and looked out at the road, but no one came. In the morning, I called Rebecca and told her about the threats. This changes the case, she said seriously. Now we can file a complaint about intimidation of a witness. The court case lasted 3 months. Brandon tried to prove that my grandmother had dementia, that I had manipulated her, that the will was invalid, but every argument he made was refuted. The hardest day was when I testified. Brandon's lawyer tried to portray me as a self-serving person who was taking advantage of a sick old woman. Isn't it true that you moved in with your grandmother right after a fight with your family over money? He asked. I moved in with my grandmother because I needed time to rethink my life, I replied. And it happened to be right around the time your parents announced the inheritance? It was no coincidence. It was then that I realized how my family really treated me. And you decided to take revenge? I decided to start living for myself. When the lawyer asked me why I allowed my grandmother to leave me all the money, I looked directly at Brandon. Because she knew I would use it wisely. That I wouldn't lose it at the casino or spend it on drugs or alcohol. That I would use it to help other people just like she had done all her life. The court ruled in my favor. The will was recognized as valid, and Brandon's accusations were found to be groundless. But most importantly, the judge publicly condemned the attempts to intimidate me by my creditors. No one has the right to use threats to influence court decisions, he said. I left the courtroom a free man. The house was mine. The money was mine. My life was mine. Brandon was waiting for me outside. Deli, he began. What? I asked. Are you apologizing? For threatening me? For trying to take away the last thing I had left of my grandmother? I really needed help. You didn't need help. You needed someone to pay for your mistakes. We're brother and sister. No, I said firmly. Brothers and sisters don't do things to each other like you did to me. We're just people who share the same parents. That's all we are. I walked away from him and didn't look back. The following months were the beginning of a new stage in my life. I used some of my grandmother's money to open my own training center, Digital Bridges. We offered computer literacy courses, help with online banking, and training in social media. The center was located in an old house on the main street, which I renovated and equipped. On the first day of work, we had 23 people sign up. By the end of the year, there were more than 100. People even came from neighboring towns. We helped an elderly woman find her grandchildren who lived in Australia. We helped a farmer create a website to sell his produce. We taught a group of pensioners how to use tablets given to them by their children. Jess helped with the renovation of the center and gradually became my partner not only in work but also in life. We were in no hurry to formalize our relationship, but we knew we wanted to be together. Sophia already called me almost stepmother and asked for help with computer projects for school. My parents called me several times trying to reconcile, but their understanding of reconciliation was that I had to forget everything that had happened and become an obedient daughter who didn't cause problems again. Family is the most important thing, my mother said in the last call. Yes, I agreed, but family is not those with whom you share blood. Family is those who share love, respect, and support with you. We have always loved you. You loved the idea of a dutiful daughter who never contradicts and always helps. You didn't love the real me. That's not fair, Deli. Maybe, but it's true. I didn't answer their calls anymore. Not out of anger, but because I had nothing to say to them. We lived in different worlds, guided by different values. Brandon disappeared somewhere after the trial. The last I heard, he moved to another state, maybe hiding from his creditors. Sometimes I feel a little sorry for him, but not enough to regret my decisions. Today is the 2-year anniversary of my grandmother Ruth's death. I'm sitting on the porch of her house, my house, and looking at the garden we once planted together. The roses are in full bloom, the tomatoes are red in the sun. Jess is repairing the fence, and Sophia is reading a book in the shade of an old oak tree. My business is booming. We already employ 3 teachers, and we are planning to open a branch in the neighboring town. I did not become a millionaire, as Brandon dreamed, but I have become something I never had before. Happy. Sometimes when I help another student send his first letter to his grandchildren or teach an elderly woman how to make video calls, I think about my grandmother. She knew what she was doing when she left me not just money, but the opportunity to become myself. Last week, I received a call from a woman I didn't know. She introduced herself as the niece of Mr. Jenkins, my first student. "Uncle William talks about you all the time," she said. "He now talks to his grandchildren on Skype every day, and has even started a gardening blog." "That's great," I said, smiling. "He says you're a real teacher, that you teach not just computer programs, but how not to be afraid of new things." Not to be afraid of new things. Perhaps this is the best compliment I have ever received, because for a long time I was afraid of everything new, a new job, new relationships, new opportunities. I was afraid of disappointing someone, afraid of not being good enough, afraid that I wouldn't be able to cope. And now I know that you can handle anything if you do it for yourself, not for someone else. Jess comes over and sits down next to me on the porch. "What are you thinking about?" he asks. "About how strange life is," I answer. 2 years ago, I thought my life was over, and it turned out that it had just begun. Do you regret anything? I think about it. Do I regret the lost years with Marcus? Do I regret breaking up with my family? The only thing I really regret is that my grandmother didn't live to see what I've become. I only wish that my grandmother could see all this, I say, pointing to our cozy evening. "She does," Sophia says, not looking up from her book. "Adults always think that the dead don't see them, but they do, and they are proud." From the mouth of a 9-year-old child, this sounds like the deepest wisdom. The sun is setting over the horizon, painting the sky in pink and gold. Tomorrow will be a new day, new students, new challenges. But I am not afraid of them. I have learned what is most important, to be myself and to protect what is dear to me. And this, it turns out, is the most valuable legacy a grandmother can leave to her granddaughter.